Episode 2, Versailles and the Birth of Financial Instability. When people think of the Treaty of Versailles, they picture politicians in fine suits at a long table in Paris, perhaps. Woodrow Wilson, Jorge Clemenceau, David Lloyd George. They think of world leaders debating territory, drawing borders, and ultimately deciding the fate of nations. To the victor go the spoils, if you will. And this stuff did happen at Versailles and in Paris. And author's note here, or podcaster's note, I should say, if you're ever in Paris, make the trip to Versailles. It's like 25 minutes away, and it is incredible. The palace there, all the artwork. But I digress. So back to our main story here. So we've got these leaders meeting in Versailles, but hidden in the fine print of these meetings where we're redrawing borders and deciding what happens to these nations, hidden in the fine print, buried between these speeches about peace and democracy, was something that was a lot more dangerous, and that is debt. So today in episode 2, we'll explore how a peace treaty designed to end all wars created an economic system so unstable it almost guaranteed the next one. World War I was not just the bloodiest conflict the world had ever seen. It was also the most expensive. By 1918, remember the war ends in 1919, Britain and France had borrowed billions from American banks. Remember, America is the creditor to the world here. They don't enter the war until much later in the game. And so the costs to Americans, both in men lost, money spent, and territory destroyed, because remember, none of World War I takes place on American soil. So Britain and France have borrowed billions from America. And Germany, who's in shambles, of course, because they lost the war, has financed the war largely on credit, printing money and then selling bonds to their own citizens. So when the war ends, everyone, or the victors, I should say, expects reparations. And we'll do, again, a full episode on reparations, because the consequences of these reparations for the global economy are dire. But in this moment in 1919, France and Britain and America, they won the war, right? And they said, after all, Germany's lost this thing, and the Allies wanted compensation for the destruction of their towns, factories, railroads, not to mention their young men who were killed, or in many cases rendered incapable of doing any sort of work, or have PTSD. Back in the day, it was called soldier's heart, because PTSD had not been formally diagnosed yet. But the damage is huge, and they say, you know what, Germany, you're going to pay a price for this. But here's the problem. Germany was already broke. Okay. So they're broke, but that didn't stop the Allies from sending them the bill. I mean, think of this brings me back to my business in real estate. My attorney has a saying. He'll say that someone is judgment proof. An example of that would be a tenant destroys one of your units and there's 15 grand in damage. You can go sue them. You can send them the bill. You can do all that. But if they don't have the money to pay it, they are judgment proof. You can't do anything with them. And we'll learn more about this as we move along and how it impacts some of the ways that some of Germany's behaviors, the way they perhaps don't negotiate in good faith because they don't have a whole lot to lose. So enough on that for now. So in 1921, the Reparations Commission handed Germany the aforementioned bill, or its tab, if you will, for the war. And that is 132 billion gold marks. It's such a large amount, it almost doesn't even matter to put it into perspective. It's just the bottom line is it's a lot more than what they can pay. It's a ridiculous amount. So, I mean, to give you in today's money, it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And I guess I'll give you a bit of perspective here. Economy at the time couldn't even produce half of that in annual output. So imagine just tomorrow, America gets hit with a bill for double our annual GDP. And I know what you're saying. We have a big national debt, but that debt is being serviced by, and there's a whole other discussion, but there's a big economy behind it. Germany doesn't have any of that. And additionally, our debt, we didn't just get hit with it all of a sudden because we lost a war. It's been slowly accumulating over time. Point being, it was an impossible debt, and it was a punishment kind of disguised as an invoice. And it's important to note here, part of the deal is to punish them monetarily, but part of it is they want to embarrass Germany. There's a clause in here where they actually, in the Reparations Act, where they are forced to sign something taking full personal blame for the war, which is, of course, ridiculous. So the war started when, you can read your history, but Franz Ferdinand got shot and it triggered this whole cavalcade of treaties and alliances that all got triggered at once. And before you knew it, the whole world was at war with each other. Germany was at fault. So was everyone else. Okay. But they had to say it's all on us. And then there's other examples, like when they were negotiating at Versailles, just little slights, like the German delegates had to stay in way crappier hotels. They even talk about when they're meeting to discuss these terms, the German representative has to stand while all the allies sit in chairs. So it is very much about money, but it's also about humiliation. So John Maynard Keynes, who you've probably heard of, famous British economist, he was famously part of these peace talks, and he walked out in protest. And after that, he wrote a book. It was called The Economic Consequences of the Peace. And basically, the book was warning that this treaty was setting the stage for collapse. He called it a Carthaginian peace, designed not to heal, but to destroy. More on that and more on Keynes later. And here's where the web of obligations and debts becomes truly insane. Okay. So France demanded reparations from Germany. Britain demanded reparations from Germany as well to pay its own war loans, right? Britain and France have borrowed money from the US. So both Britain and France owe billions to the US, and they're trying to extract it from Germany and reparations so they can pay the US. So picture this. Okay. Germany is paying France. France is paying Britain because Britain has also loaned France money. And then Britain pays the US. It's just like a circular money machine that no value is being created in the process, right? When people loan money to run a business or, you give somebody a loan because you think they're going to do something productive with said loan. This is just a perpetual money machine of people passing money in a circle, and there's no value being created here. So Germany is getting all this money extracted from them. But Germany doesn't have the money. We said that. They're dead broke. So what does Germany do now? Germany, guess what? They borrow, and from guess who? America, which then feeds this same cycle again, just money getting passed around. And remember, they can't service this debt. Think of it as in our business, real estate, where your mortgage, imagine your mortgage, I'm just using round numbers here. Imagine your mortgage is 5 times what you make every month. Like, it's just, nobody would lend you that money in normal circumstances, but these are not normal circumstances. So Germany just keeps borrowing. And so it's less of an economy or value being created, and it's more just like a financial musical chairs, if you will. And when the music stops, somebody or multiple parties are going to be left without a chair. So the bankers that we met in episode 1, the 4 bankers who ruled the world, go back and listen to that episode if you missed it, were suddenly thrust into this world of impossible obligations. In Berlin, we got shocked, right? He's trying to negotiate, but he's also trying to just stall and manipulate numbers. And he's aware, just like everyone else is, that Germany couldn't possibly pay this in full. And I touched on this earlier. When you have an opponent in a negotiation who kind of has nothing to lose, you're almost in a more dangerous place as the party that's negotiating against them than they are. They have no incentive to operate in good faith, and we'll learn more on that. In Paris, we got Moreau, he's probably of the 3 allies, the US, France, and Britain, Moreau with the French is probably demanding the most strict enforcement. Remember, these guys have been invaded by Germany twice in the last 50 years. There is bad blood, and Moreau, but the country as a whole, want to stick it to the Germans. And then on top of that, Moreau is very pro-gold. He is clinging to the French gold reserves like a total miser. And these are just his beliefs. He thinks and we'll talk more about the gold standard, but I'll leave it at that. So in London, we have Norman, right? Our eccentric protagonist or antagonist, depending, I guess, where you stand here. But he's still dreaming of restoring the pound to its former glory, which in part plays a part in restoring Britain to its former glory as well. But Britain they're not this big dog in the kennel, if you will, like they were at the height of the British Empire. So they're really not in that strong of a position to dictate these terms. And then in New York, we got our guy, Benjamin Strong, who he sees some of this house of cards being built, and he's worried about how long it can stand. But in fairness, he doesn't really hop in and fix things either. And part of that, like we touched on in episode 1, is due to health reasons. So none of them admitted it out loud, but the 4 bankers all knew that the math here just doesn't work. These guys aren't idiots. It's simple math. Germany cannot repay this money, but no one will say it out loud. There's a lesson here in groupthink where you create this environment where everyone's just like scared to say the quiet thing out loud, and it can end in disaster. I mean, I've read countless books of these stories, look up like long-term capital management, or even the Madoff scandal, or Enron is a great example. Everybody's afraid to say the thing out loud, and it usually ends very poorly. So by tying peace to money and setting sums that could never be paid, the Treaty of Versailles ultimately created a financial time bomb. Hyperinflation in Germany, resentment in France, fragile debt cycles between London, Paris, Berlin, and eventually New York, despite America starting in the strongest position. The world didn't know it yet, but this treaty had guaranteed 2 things. One, that the post-war economy was going to be unstable, and 2, no one thought about this at the time. The biggest lesson, perhaps, Germany would emerge from this defeat not humbled, but enraged. And both of these forces would shape the next 20 years. In our next episode, we'll watch the time bomb tick louder. Germany collapses into hyperinflation. People use wheelbarrows of money to buy bread. The world's financial system starts to wobble, and our four bankers try and fail to hold it together. Join me for episode 3, The Death of Money in Weimar Germany.